Hey guys, what's going on? This is Pete again, and we're back here with Andy from Sweet Additions. For those of you who don't know, he is the guy that created the company called Sweet Additions that focuses on helping people build secondary suites, legal ones, and then now he's finding himself getting into a little bit more of the urban densification business, and I'll let him talk more about what he actually does. So what are you working on currently, Andy?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, so there's a few projects that we're working on. We're always busy with clients doing secondary suite conversions because that's, I always like to say it's the low-hanging fruit of intensification and also a somewhat of a gateway drug into development because you are required to put in permits and work with the city and add in an additional housing unit. And then from that, people always explore other opportunities like potentially do 3 units or potentially do a severance of their lot and build additional houses for more intensification. So those are the kind of things that I'm busy with my clients as well as our own projects as well. And those are opportunities that we're seeing, in Toronto, in the GTA, definitely for investors and even homeowners.
Okay, so not only is this type of work that you're doing great for the city, it's great for people who are looking for affordable housing, but it's also great for investors. So it's pretty much it's pretty much a win-win-win all across the board, right? Because you're putting in better product for people to live in, right? Like sometimes in some cases the basements or the secondary suites are actually even nicer than the upstairs units or the suites, right? Okay, so I mean Andy's really in touch with what's going on in terms of city legislation and policy and all the things that are changing on that front. And I was actually at the Toronto Real Estate Board's Market Outlook for 2020 yesterday, and that was a really big part of the conversation, was talking about sort of what the missing middle is. I guess product that's in between detached properties and like high-rise development, right? So there's something missing in between that's not servicing the needs of people who need to buy affordable properties or to rent affordable properties. Right?
Yeah, so if you look across our cities in terms of what's being built by the developers, you either have your very dense high-rise condos in the city cores or even sometimes in the suburbs. And you still have single-family houses and things like that are out in the the suburbs or the exurbs, as they call it, in the very far areas.
Exurbs.
Now, the missing middle is really, it's nothing new, right? It's how we built our cities in the early 20th century, where we were relying on a lot of local amenities, having places where you can walk and have higher density. So really simple things like duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. Sort of low-rise apartment complexes, maybe 3 stories, 4 stories, that type of thing. And also mixed-use types of properties where it can be not just residential, but it could be a mix of work and residential and retail. So we see those types of developments that are happening in around a lot of cities who are more focused on the sort of the new urbanism movement, where you want to be in communities where you can walk to your daily needs as opposed to necessarily driving everywhere. So there's an opportunity for the missing middle to help with the affordability issues in GTA.
So are denser townhouses, like stacked townhouses, like that type of thing, is that considered part of the middle?
From a structural standpoint, those types of stacked high-density townhouses, they do meet the requirements of the missing middle. The only thing is a lot of these kinds of places are still kind of way out in an area where driving and parking is still a big necessity. I think that those should be built definitely. And there are a lot of builders that are doing them, in transit-friendly areas, like maybe near, LRT route or near an existing subway station. I think it makes a lot of sense. But parking is always a big issue for a lot of these places because we have city rules where there's minimum parking requirements. Now, if you design, one of these dense townhouse, stacked townhouse units in an area where you have access to transit, then maybe you can eliminate a lot of the parking. And maybe it can even be cheaper or easier for the developer to make it a financially viable product, right? So structurally, we are seeing it, and there is a lot of progress. It's not that, it's a problem, but, we have in the GTA, we have 100,000 people moving in, and it's just not fast enough. And with the missing middle, like things like duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, we're not just relying on these big developers to build them. We're relying also on mom and pop investors and homeowners themselves to be able to get in and be a developer themselves, add housing units, and make a profit for themselves for retirement, or
Yep.
even just to cover the high cost of living in a big city like Toronto.
Yep, yep. I mean, and right now we're seeing, a massive increase in rental prices, which is not great for renters per se, but as an investor, I think it's a really great opportunity right now to be able to acquire even something in downtown Toronto if the numbers make sense for you, because the rentability of it's going to be really high. The rental rates are going to yield really good return for you. But I think one of the major changes that you talked about earlier was the fact that parking isn't a requirement anymore in terms of doing secondary suites, in the city of Toronto now. Is that correct? Or
Yeah. So if you're in the yellow belt, sort of the low-rise residential areas of, say, places like North York, Scarborough, Etobicoke, where you have these single-family houses, you can put in a single legal secondary suite, and there's no additional parking requirements from what's already there. If you're in some of the higher dense areas, the R zones, where you can potentially add in 2 legal secondary suites, which means 3 units in total, then there will be parking requirements for all of the units. However, those are things that you might be able to get exempt if you were to apply for a minor variance. Okay, so there are very specific rules depending on which areas you're looking at, and that's why it's good to work with somebody who has that knowledge, or at least know where to kind of get that information through their contacts, right? That's an important part.
Okay, so just to review, so if you do 2 units, you don't need parking.
Like two units in total.
2 units in total, yeah.
Yeah.
So the unit, say for example, the unit that you're living in and you're renting out something in the basement, that's totally legal. You're going through all the proper paperwork. You don't need parking for that.
Yeah, and that's been a big issue in a lot of areas where you can't. They just they don't have the parking availability, right?
Okay.
So it helps.
And this is not just in Toronto. This is in like Etobicoke,
no. Well,
Scarborough,
within Toronto proper. So Metro Toronto, like the 6 cities.
the 6 cities. Okay.
Yeah.
Properties have gotten really expensive in Toronto, like even in areas such as Scarborough and Etobicoke. But where do we see sort of the opportunity happening in 2020? Like what's going on? If somebody wants to buy an investment property and they want to split the property into 2, maybe 3 units, where do you see that having the best opportunity in Metro Toronto right now?
Yeah, I would still say it's got to be some of the areas where it's not necessarily just a suburb of Toronto. It has to be a little bit outside. So I wouldn't include places like I probably wouldn't include places like Richmond Hill or Vaughan or Markham or even Mississauga as viable investment opportunity cities.
You
right?
mean it's hard to get it legalized? Is that what you're saying? Or
in some of those areas, yes. Yeah, so some of those areas like Richmond Hill and Vaughan, they really just kind of came on board in terms of their legalization process. So from an investment standpoint, it's actually not as easy. Depending on the location in Toronto, there are still some value in Toronto, but it would, you might have to go even farther out. Like for example, in Durham, you might have to go to Oshawa or Ajax, those types of places. Outside of Toronto, places like Kitchener, Waterloo could work, right? As a matter of fact, in Kitchener, there's a policy that just changed last year where they're going to allow 3 units. So people can potentially put in a second suite in their basement and then even a coach house, for example, in the back. But the bylaws on that have not been clearly spelled out yet, so we don't know exactly what that looks like. What are some of the bylaw requirements? What are some of the parking requirements? And that's just something that I'm keeping a close ear to the ground on to see if there's opportunities there for anybody if that's something they're interested in from an investment standpoint.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying is, because I was at the Toronto Real Estate Board's Market Outlook yesterday, and the chief planner from the City of Toronto was there talking about the missing middle and talking about how they're addressing all those problems by removing the parking issue. So Toronto is obviously sort of being seen as a little bit more forward thinking, I guess, a little bit more flexible on the policies, but we haven't quite gotten to the GTA region where they would allow for legalized secondary suites. Because to me, that's contradictory. It doesn't really make any sense. Like, why wouldn't you want people to do things properly and provide a good product for people so that they can live and be able to function and be able to afford to pay their living costs and work in this city, right? And that's just, and when I say Toronto, I always refer to Toronto as the GTA as well, too, because we don't all just live in our little pocket in our little neighborhood and do everything there. We travel all across the city for everything. We go downtown to watch a game. We go to different restaurants. We visit friends in different neighborhoods, right? So to me, all of the GTA is Toronto. I don't really consider it, but obviously from a legislation point of view, it's they do things differently. From city to city, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about inside Toronto. Like, so what are some of the more sort of innovative things that we think we can do to address this missing middle problem, right? I mean, like, so laneway houses has been a really big thing over the last couple years. There's some really strong proponents that are talking about that. So, like, is that happening now? Is that something that's viable? Does that make sense for an investor, or does that make sense for somebody who wants to make supplemental income based on their property? Like, where are we at right now, policy wise, with that type of thing?
Yeah. So laneway houses have been approved effective. I think it's been a year and a half or 2 years now, and there were a couple of companies that were very instrumental in kind of pushing that forward in Toronto, and it makes a lot of sense. There's potentially, I think, up to 50,000 houses with laneways access where you can actually build one of these, right? So there are some challenges in terms of the building code because of access to these laneways, but there's still a lot of properties where it's feasible. And these are in some of the higher density areas where you can potentially even convert the single family home into 3 units and then add a laneway house where now you have 4 units in total. And these things are, they're beautifully built. You just have to be very creative in terms of how you plan the site. Parking requirements actually get removed on housing with laneway because they realize that these are in areas where people have access to good transit. So I think it definitely makes sense for homeowners who already have access to these laneways, of course. But as an investor, if you can get access to any of these properties with a laneway, I think long term it's a very good opportunity. And but laneways, they're a solution right now for a lot of homeowners and investors who want to be able to go into these houses where there are zones, so they can actually convert them to 3 units, the existing house, and then add in a laneway. So you're potentially turning 1 housing unit into 4 housing units. And with the rents that we're seeing in Toronto, a lot of times it does make sense to cover all the costs, right?
So, so inside of Toronto, what's the ideal type of house where you could go from 2 to 3 units?
I would say the best would be the 2.5-story type of Victorians,
right? Yeah.
Or 3-story Victorians, because you also have to design it if you're doing 2 accessory suites, so 3 units in total. There are bylaw requirements in terms of restricting the size of the secondary units. So if you have a 2.5 or 3-story house, you can design it in such a way that you're within the bylaws and you're within the rights there to be able to do that without having to apply for a variance. Because in any city, whenever you have to go beyond what the rules allow, you can ask for a variance, but it gets tricky because neighbors get involved, right? And in Toronto, in the higher density areas where you have a lot of people living in tight quarters, you're going to get a lot of input from neighbors, right? And so you kind of want to minimize that as much as possible, because even if, let's say, you're doing everything in good faith in terms of adding in housing unit, you're going to make it really nice, you're going to rent it out to high quality tenants. People are always concerned about change. So where we can try to minimize that, we like to do it. So I think, it's a long answer, but I think those types of properties, those Victorians in those high density zones, 2.5, 3 stories, work very well for the 3 unit conversions. The zoning bylaws in Toronto are very complicated because you have these old individual cities, these 6 boroughs, where they have their individual bylaws, and then you have the amalgamated cities bylaws, and they're contradicting, and one supersedes the other. So it is a little bit of a hodgepodge, and it gets messy, and that's why we don't want to hold our breaths in terms of waiting for these things. We want to know, we want to basically take the approach of what's going to work now financially, and have the expectation that potentially later on we can do more, but we want to have plan B work right now, and then shoot for more later on, right? So it's always a good idea to buy something with potentially some more land, because there's a very good chance that you're going to be able to develop that land in the future and be able to add more property and boost your cash flow, right? So land is something in the cities. It's definitely something that's going to be very valuable in the coming years and decade in Toronto.
You mean like people's backyards, right?
People's
even backyards, right?
Yeah. So even if you can get a corner lot or something like that. So we do a lot of projects where we'll go into a house with a corner lot. We'll do a house with a secondary suite, and then we'll sever the corner lot and build another house with a secondary suite facing the other street. So those are opportunities that we see, in Toronto proper as well as outside of Toronto.
Okay. Okay, so, well, I mean, lots of stuff to talk about here. I mean, obviously, we can make a video as long as we want it because we can actually talk all day about this type of thing. But I think the idea is that if you have any questions, if you're looking for a property this year, something inside Toronto proper, you're looking to maximize the value, you're looking to maximize the rental income, or you're looking to just, support, give yourself a little bit more supplemental income on a monthly basis because rent rates are very high, property values are also high, which makes it even more essential that you look for something that brings you some extra income at the end of the month. And that's sort of what Andy specializes in, and I sort of do that in my sleep. I help people find properties that are good rental suites and something that's comfortable for their family to live in. So if you guys are interested, then give us a shout. I'm going to put the contact information in the description below. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up and give us some comments. But more importantly, if you have questions that you need answered, then you should definitely contact us directly. And Andy, as always, thanks again for being on the show. Lots of great content. And if you're interested, if you're interested, he's got an online course right now that teaches you how to go through the process of doing a secondary suite the right way.
Okay, so the course is called the Second Suites Profit Formula Masterclass. So we have a lot of clients that are actually taking the course. We have a lot of people that want to be more hands-on and want to learn about the whole process of doing a profitable second suite investment. We have a lot of clients where just because of our resources, we can't service them. So they go to our website and they learn they learn how to do a second suite using the program, and they're able to kind of do a lot of the work themselves. So if it's okay, I'll share the website.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll put it in the link. We'll put it in the cards as well, and you can click and head over to Andy's site and sign up for that.
I'll have a special promo as well for $300 off.
Okay.
So if you go to the website suiteadditionspro.com, so you're going to have that link there, right?
Yep.
So the special coupon code is special 300. All caps.
Awesome.
And that's going to save you $300. And we're getting great feedback from that. There's a live Q&A that we do, and feel free to check it out.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks for checking out the video, and if you have any questions, hit us up directly.
Thanks, everyone.
See you next time.